Thank you, participants, to all of you. So we actually crossed the time, so we have to go to the next session right away. The next session is cultural democracy, different perspectives in cultivating tolerance and appreciating diversity. And we have four presenters. Professor Jelena Drobac from Academy of Applied Technical Studies in Belgrade, Professor Edin Jasarovic from Faculty of Dramatic Arts, University of Montenegro, Professor Amela Frljuckic, Faculty of Political Science, University of Sarajevo, and Professor Marko Gosović, Faculty of Visual Arts, University Mediterranean, Podgorica. And we are going to start with Professor Jelena Drobac. Is she up? Yes.
Yes, yes. Hello. Hello to everybody.
Professor Jelena Drobac comes from Academy of Applied Technical Studies, Belgrade, Serbia. She graduated from the Faculty of Applied Arts Graphic Design major. She received Doctor of Arts degree at the Interdisciplinary Art Studies University of Arts in Belgrade in the field of digital arts. She's a professor at the Academy of Applied Technical Studies Belgrade and head of the design department. She has been active on the design scene for 20 years in the field of identity, typography, and packaging. Participated in over 50 group exhibitions and festivals in Serbia and abroad. Her work has been published in more than 50 design publications worldwide. She won more than 20 graphic design awards in France, Germany, USA, Russia, Bosnia and Herzegovina, Slovenia, and Serbia. The title of her presentation today is Typography as a Reflection of Society. So, Professor Drobac, you have your time.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. I hope you hear me fine. My sound is okay. So yeah, I'm so happy to be the first following up this heated debate. And the question about typography, it's a topic quite near and quite dear to my heart. And I wanted to do a quick presentation about something I did for my PhD thesis. And it's about the role of typography in the world and in our society, because typography is a practical field. It is not too much theory concerning it. And for me, it was quite interesting to gather all the information and to have my own structure of the role of typography and its reflection of the society. So firstly, typography and letters are completely in the sphere of civilization, unlike speech and language, which is innate to humans and to some degree of animals. Writing and typography completely belongs to the development of civilization. And it took really a long time from that drawings to become abstract letters that we take for granted. We learn it in the early age of 5, 6, 7, depending on the country, and then we take it for granted. The importance of the writing, because it connects people through space and time, was actually known, and its greatness was known and praised through different civilizations throughout time. So a lot of ancient civilization attributed the invention of typography and letters to various gods. But also in our everyday in Europe, in most languages, we have something that is called Holy Script. In our region, it's called Sveto Pismo, which is again a reminder through etymology about the grandness and the vast influence and the greatness of writing and typography. Typography in the classical scholar term, it starts in Europe, I must say, from the mid 15th century, and it's a practical discipline, more or less scientific, but it's more a practical artistic discipline, but it perfectly reflects the wider social and historical context. So in the sense that when typography in Europe, in European sense, was created, it's in the early age of printing, it was about geographical origin and higher social status. So not a lot of people were literate, and nowadays, in modern age, it's an indispensable part of our urban landscape and everyday life. So this actually in front of you, it's a historical, let's say, timeline of development of various types of letters and typography throughout time. But if you take a closer look, it completely reflects the architecture of the time, and completely reflects the technology of the time. So these are major focal points in terms of aesthetics of letters, but also big shifts and change historically in Europe. So if we take it in the Gutenberg time, when printing and typography in the European sense was created, it was medieval ages, and the Gothic aesthetics were reflected not only on the way people dressed, lived, how they perceived their world, but also in typography. Later on, when new types of presses came to Italy and the remaining of Europe, the Italians changed the aesthetics of type and created something that it's more likely to their heritage. So they created something that we call Roman letters. Later on, it became, throughout the Industrial Revolution, they became more drastic and a bit different in the way of contrast, and but still preserving that aesthetics that had the architecture and the society as well. And when advertising was created, the new type of letters were also created, especially in France. So, and we call it Art Deco or Secessia or whatever in different kinds of countries of Europe, but the aesthetics were more or less the same. And today, our contemporary society was completely shifted and changed a century ago with avant-garde and creation of and implementation of sans serif typefaces that are actually a standard now, which was quite unusual at that time. Of course, the avant-garde movement was a movement that was quite diverse in its aesthetics, but what they were all about was usage of new technology, new materials, and on the other hand, new materials and different kinds of artists demanded a different and more simplified typography. So also one of the greatest ways to perceive your society through typography is a combination of typography and fashion, which is quite an interesting one because in the late 19th century, the world was introduced to fashion magazines, and those fashion magazines created a really fertile place for consumerism that we live in today. And those fashion magazines had the aesthetics. There was not only about clothes, but it's also about design, layout, typography, way of living, way of acting, and photography and everything else. So it was quite an unusual thing to juxtapose the fashion of the time with the typography of magazines. This is an example of Vogue magazine, which is one of the oldest running still today magazines of fashion. But still, it was quite interesting. This timeline here ends in early 50s, because from that moment on, the typography of Vogue, the aesthetics of Vogue hasn't changed much. And you can see that through this, even better through this research done by Yale students a few years ago, where they created a project called Robots Reading Vogue, Data Mining in Fashion. And they pulled all the covers of Vogue put it on top of the other, creating layers. And through that, you can see the aesthetics of each decade of the last century, where in the first years you can't see anything because the typography, the aesthetics, everything was interchangeable. While from the 40s onwards, you can see that typography is fixed and it's not changing at all. But the peak of that is actually the 80s. I don't know if you can see it on your screen, where it's not just about type, it's not just about layout, but the girls on the covers look more or less exactly the same. You see the way of the photo was cropped, the way of they choose the model, everything was standardized. So it's not just about standardizing the type of the fashion magazines, it's standardizing beauty and aesthetics as well. So that's for me something that is quite interesting. This is from the 47, 46 more or less, where you have different authors and different aesthetics and different ways of doing layout and typography, while in the 70s and in the 80s, especially in the 80s, all the women on the cover were more or less the same looking woman. So it says quite a lot about.
I'm sorry for interrupting you.
Yes.
But we don't see your shared screen for some.
No. Oh, I'm so sorry. Also, just 1 second.
Can you please go through the process again? Maybe
yes, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Just 1 second. Do you see it now?
No,
oh,
I'm sorry, I don't.
I don't know why is that.
So
yeah, I'm so sorry.
There it is.
Yeah, I'm just 1 second. Yeah, well, this is the part that I spoke about, the aesthetics and the juxtaposing architecture to different typefaces, and juxtaposing fashion and Vogue cover typography to the predominant fashion of the time. While for me, this is quite a good example of the standardization, not only of typography or the layout, but also beauty standards and aesthetics of the magazine. And the one on the right is the one that I told you about, where the model is the aesthetics is completely standardized. You can see even the way the headshot was done, and the position of everything on that face is just more or less the same woman, with just slight differences. So for me also is quite interesting because in most of the previous century, everything that was done typographically for fashion was actually done by two typefaces, more or less, with slight variation. It was Didot in Bodoni, and it was complete domination of these heavy contrasted serif types, as you can see, not only in logos, but in general fashion layouts. And for me, it's quite interesting because the both creators of that fashion typography were actually an Italian and a Frenchman. And also the dominant countries and the dominant aesthetics of that time in fashion, and the dominant brands were actually French and Italian. So it's all more or less intersected and interrelated. But you can see here, it's a wonderful research done for an American paper a few years ago. It's called From Thick and Thin, that a typographer did, analyzing all the major luxury brands of fashion and their typography. And they created like 3 different zones. So you have that highly contrasted Bodoni Didot type of logo. And then we have the more French approach to it with sans serif logos. And then somewhere in between, Yves Saint Laurent. So that was a situation until some 10 years ago. So what for me was quite interesting is that in every major social and economical shift came a typographic revolution in a sense. So all these architectural and typographic focal points actually came with a sort of a sociological, economical, and global revolution in its sense. So since now we will live in new social and economic paradigm, in the moment, this very moment we're living in. So the question is, do we need new typography? And what that typography will tell about our world today. And many claim that we don't need different typography, but social media that need new typography, new typographic aesthetics. So in that kind of sense, it is more or less said that social media is the one dictating new typography and dictating some social changes that we as graphic designers and photographers can see in a certain way. So what can be read through typography, not just by the means of typography, with the changes that are happening right now. So after like a century of dominance in a certain way of certain typography, we have really big change happening in the last decade when all of the big fashion companies opted to change its very different logotypes into caps lock, sans serif, more or less same looking typefaces. And they claim it's because of the social media, new types of advertising, and so on. But for me, as a graphic designer, and it's something that I talked about with my colleague Nikola Latkovic, Professor Nikola Latkovic, some time ago, is whether this is something that it's okay or it's not okay. What does it say about world? So this, for me, this reflects complete change in terms of fashion, in terms of gender, in terms of dominant aesthetics in some way. Also in typographic norms, if you put all caps lock, it means you're shouting at someone. So is it too loud now in that fashion and aesthetic term? Is it what the big companies are aiming? So this is quite an interesting field to do, and also a lot of design theorists claim that this is not branding, this is blending. So we're not creating new blends, we're blending everything and everyone out by removing what is a bit different from their counterparts. So what's happening and what does it says about our world now? And for me, also, it kind of has something to do with our previous lecture. Is since I live in Serbia and it's all the graphic country, in a matter of type was a few years ago and 3 decades ago was actually choosing type was actually a matter of political opinion, more or less. So if you go to the newsstand and you try to pick some of the newspapers, depending on do they use Cyrillic or do they use Latin, it was a matter of statement. Also, the type of type they use was a matter of political and any other statement. So it was quite interesting to take a look on topics like that. Also, for me,
I'm sorry, Professor Drobac, I have to remind you on time.
Yeah, I just have 1 more minute and then I'm done. And for me also, it was quite an interesting project to do, and has a lot to do with our previous topics. Is actually a project by Nikola Jurek called the Balkan Typeface System, which is a blend of Cyrillic and Latin, which was quite interesting in in terms of design, but also in terms of sociology and common history and past and so on. So one of my favorite uses of that typeface was actually used in Balkan Floods Fund. So that's more or less what I want to say. I'm so sorry for the technical issues.
Thank you. So we are going further. Next presenter is Professor Edin Jasarovic from Faculty of Dramatic Art, University of Montenegro. He's associate professor, PhD, born in 1982 in Podgorica, Montenegro. He completed his master's study at the University of Arts in Belgrade at UNESCO Chair of Interdisciplinary Studies, Management in Culture and Cultural Policy of the Balkans. In 2016, he defended his doctoral dissertation at the Faculty of Dramatic Arts in Belgrade. From 2017 to 20, he was a member of the Council of the Montenegrin National Theatre. Later, in 2020, he was appointed as the president of Council of the Film Center of Montenegro. In addition to Faculty of Dramatic Arts in Cetinje, he also teaches at the Faculty of Political Science, Music Academy, and his Faculty of Fine Arts of the University of Montenegro. By the decision of Managing Board of University of Montenegro in 2020, he was appointed as a Dean of Faculty of Dramatic Arts in Cetinje for the mandate period until 2023, and for the second term from 23 to 2026. Professor Jasarovic, welcome, and you have your time now.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, I forgot. The title of your presentation today is Representation of Cultural and Identities as a Precondition for an Efficient and Successful Society. Please.
Okay, thank you. I think you can see my presentation. Am I right at the screen? Okay.
Sure.
Okay, so as you speak, because we have a very scarce time, I will try to be as fast as possible. These are in this titling. It's based upon the possibilities about promoting new types of representation, and you will see it why, for creation for possible creation of more efficient and more successful society, having in mind that this chapter, this presentation, I will start with the complexity of building of contemporary national identities, especially in the framework of Balkan area. And that's the hard thing to explain, the solely understanding of contemporary national identities, which are created in very complex macro structure, which are on the Balkan area composed of micro, usually ethnic elements. So in this slide, you can see the possible dimension of how those national identities are created in a regular and in particular ways. So what is the basis for my understanding of this path for, or let's say, cognitive map in psychosocial, emancipatory, political, and cultural dimension in creating supranational ideological concept, is the two types of approaches, and you can see it here that Charles Taylor, in his work of the political recognition, he defines two types of political of identity. One, it's based upon the differentiation as a strategy, and one is based upon the political of identity recognition. And I built this, let's say, addition to this structure of his notes by creating political of identity representation. Going further, it should be explained that differentiation is the policy of making distinctiveness from the others, and the recognition is the policy of identifying identifying similarities with others. What I added is that representational part of those policy could include self-definition or self-promoting aspect of course, in any type of policy identification, there is should be included contextual analysis of the developmental dilemmas in creating Montenegrin identity, bringing possible new values which could promote excellence in Montenegrin society as a basic structure to promote it more. Recognizing and understanding, addressing fundamental development dilemmas in identity construction. So in the recent happenings, we have witnessing some kind of shifting methodologies in identity construction. So this methodology should be oriented more towards the cultural anthropological excavation, towards the symbolic creation, which could highlight the significance of cultural pluralism in Montenegrin societies. And this goes along with globalization and digitalization as a context of possible creation of the hybrid identities present in everyday life. In that matter, national identities as a possible societal success could be established linking with national identity with cultural policy of the state. And that was my hypothesis of how the cultural policy could be really directed in terms of building the common goals. What could be find is that evaluation criteria for creating of this policy could be a greater inclusiveness of national cultural policy, shaping the national identity. So a greater inclusiveness of the policy. That means that the cultural policy should be more oriented towards the openness or the closure of national cultural policy. And the fundamental assumption is based upon the question: could cultural policy development be more oriented for the creating an inclusive national identity in Montenegro or from Montenegrins? Identity policies seen from the point of recognition or the differentiation that I mentioned before is all the time based upon some political circumstances that we have on the Balkans, political in terms that they are very creating the scope or the problematic area. And I just make some points about contemporary trends in identity representation, having in mind that we have to analyze what are the branding aspect of the political representation of identity are really present, and what is based upon so-called fluid models of multiculturalism. What is interesting to point there, that is the point that in this trend, treating ethnic identities as optional or hybrid could go in alignment with the civic concept of the state. So the hybrid identities becomes more civic rather than they're necessarily oriented towards the national or ethnic, and that is what is going on globally. Diversity in political discourse of global multiculturalism in recent time has been challenged by some nationalistic issues, cultural memory, public discourse, war traumas, and ethnocentric narratives, which will be addressed later in the discussion. But for these stages of change or methodology shift towards the optional or fluid multiculturalism, we should introduce Milton Bennett intercultural sensitivity scale, which is based upon 6 stages of the representational dilemma, which could be, as you can see in this of his diagram, you can see the you can see that this model is dependent on ethnocentric stages in making a course towards the ethno-relative stages of a political representation of the identity. In any case, ethno-relativism is a new way how to succeed in the so-called multicultural goal. I will not go deeply much more in this explanation because there is a lot of other things to say, but that is like a common goal to go in this ethno-relativistic or ethno-relativism as a multicultural goal, which we find that is not so, it hasn't been so successful in some areas. But in any case, we can discuss it, we can discuss the policies of identity recognition in terms of comparative historical discourses. So, for example, in Montenegro, these comparative historical discourses is seen as an efficiency, is seen as a pragmatic comparing to the other. So in Montenegro, the overall comparative historical discourses goes along from King's Nikola era, from 19th century, speaking that Montenegro will become a land as a Switzerland. In recent times, by the politicians, we are compared as a Luxembourg, Monaco, or Singapore. But those are just some new ways or new types of how we interpret our competitiveness. Of course, there is a regional identity recognition based upon ethnic minorities, and they are trying to be crucial contributors to overall Montenegro national identity. Going further, we can see the positive recognition in identity differentiation policies based upon the cultural center of the state, or bringing closer to this center or not. It's very important for building upon decentralized cultural influence of peripheries, which are present as well in Montenegrin society. Of course, we should think about cultural geography shaping the external influences of the peripheries in terms of cultural production. Of course, there is all the time challenges in making the principles of identity differentiation based upon challenges in affirmative cultural funding. So in Montenegro, we have a fund for development of the minority culture, but this fund is totally oriented in the wrong way. It supports the projects of cultural monocultural dialogue rather than the intercultural dialogue, and that's the problem, because it's that's orientation. It's far from being good. Of course, there is also present misinterpretation and stereotyping in media, which brings the division, for example, between the Montenegrins and Serbs. So those are different platforms in which those dialogues are functioning, as well as a political debates upon some values and what we are valuing in our cultural and national policy. Of course, the lack of dialogue and understanding indicates that we have to have official government policy in intercultural dialogue to maybe prevent identity-related conflicts, because we are Balkan area and we have a war every 7 years here. So, of course, this could be done in both in policy of recognition or differentiation, exposing the international position of Montenegro, which has been showcased as stable. Montenegro is a country which doesn't produce anymore the war conflict and so on. It's just the narrative, because in Montenegro we are witnessing a higher index of intercultural intolerance in recent years. Of course, cultural policy as a platform for inclusive dialogue could support those narratives to be, or tensions and conflicts to be suppressed. So my idea is that to use the cultural policy as a building ground for making more inclusive dialogue. Of course, there is several challenges after the independence of Montenegro. There is far more developmental and very problematic integrative process for some ethnicities. But this is a result of absence of previously agreed criteria for inclusiveness of the state. So by the promise that we will sometime become a country as a Switzerland, that was the far narrative. Maybe we should insist on the model of more inclusive cultural policy, and that brings us to the end of my presentation, which is stating that inclusivity could be foundation of the successful society, and it has been approved. It has been approved in, and that goes along with the principles of identity representation, on which I insist. So this inclusivity of national concept of cultural policy could only bring successful stories. In this, you can see the literature and reference for this presentation, which could I send you to all participants of this session. So thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Professor. We are going to go to the third presentation in this session, and it is by Professor Amela Frljuckic, I'm sorry, Faculty of Political Science, University of Sarajevo. Professor is an artist, cultural professional, political scientist, and PhD candidate of the Faculty of Political Science, University of Sarajevo. She has 2 master's degrees. The first she obtained in 2017 at the Music Academy, University of Sarajevo, and the second in 2020 at the Faculty of Political Science, University Sarajevo. As an Erasmus and Sempius scholar, she also studied at Conservatorio di Musica in Italy, at the Academy of Music at the University of Ljubljana in Slovenia. In 2020, she published a musical book and digital album, Musical Postcard from Montenegro, that was supported by the Ministry of Culture of Montenegro and the Montenegrin Music Center. She was awarded with special recognition, Golden Badge, by the University of Sarajevo, and won numerous music awards. As a PhD candidate, she is focused on researching connections between arts and politics. Today, she is going to speak about music as a medium of protest. So, Professor, please, you have your time now. I'm sorry, your microphone is on mute. It's on mute again.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Great. No matter how experienced you are, this always happens. So good afternoon. I'm really happy to be with you today. Thanks to Universitat Mediterranean for bringing us together. So I will try to be as short as it is possible. So to kick off, I will very briefly touch upon various historical periods to shed light on how music has always been an important element of human expression through time, but also to point out the importance and role of music creation during different periods. So there is no doubt that music enriches people's life. But if you look back on the history of human beings, we can recognize that next to the basic needs for survival that are universal for us all, a need for a creative expression is recognizable in different geographical spaces and history period. Unfortunately, we know that music history, as also some other disciplines, has lost a significant amount of its content due to the absence of written or recorded music. So we do not have written proofs for the oldest history periods, but it does not mean that making rhythms of singing was not always there in some form to follow everyday activities. In support of this, we can look up to anthropological research of primitive tribes that reveal the importance of music in their religious rituals and ceremonies, traveling further or sooner through time by reading the books, the works of one of the most important philosophers like Aristotle or Plato, where we understood the importance of music in their societies. We know that these philosophers in their speeches pointed out the importance of quality music for the policy and quality growth of good citizens. During this time in ancient Greece, we know that also their social happenings with music were very important as gathering place, and we can see it connection like it is today. Even after, if we look now, a new era during the Middle Ages, that is a period that is classified in history, a really black period for human rights. If you look from the position of musicologists and music theory, we know that music theory really growth very complex under the control of church, and the peak of this is reflected in the music of Johann Sebastian Bach, for example. After the divide between the church and state, secular music flourished. And now it becomes very interesting because over the time, development and democratization of society were continuously followed by the liberalization of musical expression and the popularity of different genres, especially in the 20th century. Today, of course, we know that music follows literally every step in our lives through the headphones or the speakers. So why I did this brief introduction? To point out that music, in fact, was always an integral part of human daily life, but also it is important that music was not ignored in some way of patronage or even control. Why? Because as we can see, the church, for example, supported the making of spiritual music for believers under strict rules of composing, and later composers or performers had patrons who supported their work through different historical times. And even today we have institution within, we have some way of control and the development of culture, and inside it also music. So we can conclude that in general music was always recognized and important to look at, develop, but also oversight in some moments. The question of control and rebellion is important for this topic because in certain historical moments, music became the extended arm of the fight against political and or societal control and becomes a boost to the resilience of the protesters. Songs in the context of protest, through their lyrics, rhythm, and melodies, serve as a medium for conveying messages. And more than that, they become a mean through which individuals recognize and connect, intensifying the emotional charge that leads to the action. We can ask, why is it that even in the situation of crisis, often people feel the necessity to sing or play together? Of course, when we are in comfortable situation, of course, we like to sing, to celebrate together and to be relaxed. But to search answer for this question, of course, I consult some researchers. And for example, I will name one, Lewis, that published very interesting work, The Role of Music in Popular Social Movements, a theory and case study of the Island state of Hawaii. And he explained why music is a particularly unique and effective force for mobilizing this content within oppressed population because. So he mentions 5 elements. First, music can clearly define the state of social disaffection and strengthen element of social ideology, rationalization the social movement. Second, music is less likely to be taken seriously and therefore censored or suppressed than more rational and written forms of communication, such as speeches or pamphlets. 3, music can empower social protests towards traditional values and symbols of the group through the use of traditional music forms, instrument, clothing, and presentation style. 4, music can project powerful messages that might be more effective in promoting solidarity than more rational modus of communication. And fifth, in this emotional communication, music can create a charge of group interest, elevating them to the intensity of moral right. Then, for example, Higgins in 2018 published paper connecting music to ethics, and he comments, music is useful because of the benefit it brings, some of which are recognition of shared sensory modalities, revival of infantile feelings of safe closeness, fun, which leads to release of oxytocin, and this shared emotional experience contributes to music power to foster solidarity. So like the answer to the previous question, I can do some kind of summary and say that people sing together even in situation of crisis because it gives inspiration, sense of belonging to the group, raise emotional excitement, send message through words, and sometimes has a simple component through the clothes or some other objects. We know that there are different types of protests. Sometimes protests last a few days, and they're willing to point on some issues that should be checked. And sometimes we are speaking about protests that turns into a big revolution. The size of protest varies, but the context or basis of protest is always based on the dissatisfaction of people. So we have a group of people that is mad and wants to do something. While I was preparing this presentation, I decided to take 4 examples of 4 protests in different parts of the world. Why I did that? Because I was curious how people in different parts of the world and people who have totally different cultures, they speak different languages, and they have different life circumstances, how actually they choose their songs and how that songs become popular during these moments of crisis. Let's start with one, let's say now in literature traditional example. We are speaking about United States of America, civil rights movement in the 20th century. The civil rights movement for the rights, but also the protests, anti-war protests that happened in 60s there. So there were various of protests, and there is one name that just pop out of during this time. It's the name of Pete Seeger, who was a big activist, musician, composer, and who was even in one moment he was even in prison because of his activity. Some of the most popular songs are "We Shall Overcome," that is like anthem of the American civil rights movement. And for example, second, I will name "Where All the Flowers Gone." I guess we all heard this song. It's very emotional. Melancholic melody that actually point out the loss of young people, young men during a war in Vietnam. From this example, we can see like how actually this song can be made. For example, "Where All Flowers Gone." It's interesting because Seeger, he took like lyrics from one old Ukraine song, and the music was actually from one Irish band. So he actually made like a mix of these two contexts, and it's interesting that it was actually used in the United States of America. Also this song "We Shall Overcome," it was really interesting how some songs become so popular because there were one protest, and one of the protesters, it was a woman in South Carolina who started to sing song "I Will Overcome," because actually this song has origin in a traditional song. So they change I will overcome to we will overcome. And actually Pete really promoted through different occasions, and is the reason why it became popular. And also what is very important element in these protest songs or songs that are used for protest, it's always we, it's never me, it's always we. Like we are showing that we do not want. So it's always something collective emotion that we are in, like we are all in one problem, let's say it like that. Now second example that is newer, it's Sudan, Africa. So I guess you also followed, it was really popular on social media, a wonderful young student dressed in white toga who is standing on the car and reciting some lyrics with the accompaniment of percussions. So it's Ala Salah, a student from Sudan. who become who really popularized that protest worldwide, because people were really impressed by her actually behave and her bravery. So she was actually, when you hear that clip of that, it's more even, it's not just singing, it's more like performance, because you have her who is saying words, and you have a big group of people who are actually answering to that on her every break. So it was very interesting to me that I was reading like a text about it from Nisrin Alamin and Tehani Ismail. They are professionals for African cultural studies. They actually explained the true history. Their woman actually that had that moment. It's like echoes the long tradition of Sudanese women performing songs and praise in honor of the dead, strengthening the moral of warriors and defying ruthless leader. So these are words of these researchers. So sometimes we have strong that traditional element that push the group somehow to collaborate. Now let's come back to Europe. In 2013, there were one protest. It's absolutely different. It's not like it wasn't. It was big, but it wasn't big like a first and second example. It's called Revolucija, protest in front of Parliament of Bosnia and Herzegovina. So we even that moment was like a big concert, because many musicians came to support citizens who were against that. And so it was like dubioza kolektiva, Tuštuke, Zoster, Franki, Skroz, Todorica. So I know people from Balkan. I know that we know for this performer, but for example, these people actually they performed in first and second examples. So America and Sudan, we had examples of songs that were actually made for this let's say occasion, or they just somehow become popular. But for third examples, songs that were performed on this protest were actually original songs from these musicians, and usually many of them are like some kind of activists. And also like fourth, I know my time is ticking, Middle East 2011 and Arab Spring. Let's say first example, Egypt, Rami Erhan, it means leave. So that that song was directly made for the former president Mubarak, and it was in even lyrics you have his name, and later he changed it in the way of not directly to Mubarak, but to the soldiers that are controlling the country. And also El General from Tunis, he published song President of the Country, and he was even in jail because of that for some short period of time. For example, this last example is example of protest song that became popular by social media. So he didn't perform it live, but it was really millions it had millions of views. So if we compare last century to this century, we have social media that is fantastic medium to share this protest, these problems political that are the sea of this protest. And today, because of the popularity of performance, it's known to be really to be heard really worldwide. So let's make it for the end. Let's make short classification. So original songs used during protest can be original or can be mixed, like I explained the first and second example. How this song became popular, sometimes it is influence of performer like we had of Peter Sieg for the first example, or the fourth example of El General, and it usually becomes popular because of that intensity of lyrics. And similarities between all these four types of protests is that every of this song had some message of hope, unite, resilience, right, a belief in bravery. So to conclude, in the end of the this presentation, instead of classical conclusion, I want to point out that in this region, there is a huge potential research of music and political and social activities that we miss at the moment. And I hope this will be inspiring, especially maybe for the students to become curious and to continue like researching in this way. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Frljuckic. So our next presenter is Professor Marko Gosović, Faculty of Visual Arts, University Mediterranean, Podgorica. Professor Gosović is a PhD candidate, has obtained his Master of Arts degree from Faculty of Visual Arts, University Mediterranean, Podgorica, where he presently serves as an associate professor in the field of creative industries, specifically within the following subjects: sound design module, digital culture, and digital culture. Currently, he is enrolled in PhD studies program at the University Donja Gorica, Faculty of Arts, focusing on his research on the topic of Montenegrin bridges, constructions, and sound. As one of the winners of Montenegro Ministry of Science Scholarship granted for 3 years period. Throughout his career, Professor Gosović has actively participated in numerous conferences, seminars, courses, training schools, and workshops in Montenegro, the wider region, and abroad. And he is an author of numerous different projects and exhibitions. Today's presentation, Professor Gosović does with Filip Ferdinandi, a colleague of ours, and it's titled Creating a Digitalized Sound Bank of Traditional Montenegrin Instruments. Professor Gosović, you have your time now.
Thank you, Balsa. Do you hear me?
Yes, we hear you.
Thank you for your introduction. And since I'm last in this row of presentations, I will try to be as short as possible. And the first thing I should do is to share my screen. Do you see it?
Yes, we do.
Okay. So you already mentioned the title of my presentation, today's presentation. It's about creating a digitalized sound bank of traditional Montenegrin instruments. So this idea is not just from my side. It's I came to this idea with my colleague Filip Ferdinandi, who is not here at the moment, but I will present this project by myself, and I will try to explain you what is behind this concept. So firstly, the name of the project is Triton. As you may know already, this is endemic Montenegrin species that lives in Bukumiri Lake on the territory of municipality of Podgorica, and Latin name of this species is Tritorus alpestris montenegrinus, better known as Triton. So this is a unique salamander that symbolizes the Montenegrin heritage and is also associated for us as with sound. So it's like a tree plus stone on English, and also on our language we can say tree, ton, so it can be connected with the music association with some with numbers and tones as it is known in music. Also the Post of Montenegro released a stamp with the Montenegrin salamander motif that is designed by Montenegrin sculptor Darko Vučković. You can see that the stamp here on this slide. So I want to tell you about the aim of this project. This project aims to create a bank of digitalized and chromatized sounds of traditional Montenegrin instruments as well as voices. So firstly, I want to mention some of those instruments. And firstly, we have to do some research on those instruments and voices. Some of them that are almost known in this region are gusle, diple, frula, tamburica, šargija, and tapan, and also voices that are also familiar to you if you're from this region. as lelekanje, narikanje, tuženje, which come from the narrower or wider territory of our country. So they're not just those instruments. I have to mention also another one that maybe you didn't hear about. It's bilbil, duduk, chitelia, brach, rog, trumpet from the tree bark, dvojnice, diples smijehom, I don't know how to translate that, kaval, zurla, pirinja, talambas, goč, zvono, and čegrtaljka. And also some kind of improvised instruments that also represent a part of musical folklore. It would be a list of bukve or the fagus leaf, travka, kapica od žira, slamka, or another herbs that can be fresh or dry, dječja zvečka, kid's toy, klepetuša, pucaljka or prangija, and tepsia, that is almost the same as casserole dish, and other. So I want to mention, you almost know every of those main instruments that I mentioned in first slide, and I want just to show some of them. You all know gusle as an instrument that is a single stringed musical instrument traditionally used in the region of southeastern Europe or Balkans, and you know that the gusle player holds the instrument vertically between his knees and with the left hand fingers on the strings. So it's very typical instrument for this region, and you already know how it sounds. Also, frula is a musical instrument which resembles a medium-sized flute, traditionally played in rural southeastern Europe and South Slavic countries. So, and it's commonly used by shepherds who would play while tending their flocks. Also, this is some kind of diplo is an instrument similar to the frula, also made from wood and with very simple design, and the sound is very similar to frula sound. Also, this is tamburica, that refers to the family of long-necked lutes, popular in Southeast Europe and Central Europe, and very similar to tamburica. There is shargia, that is that is not very common, and it's similar to Turkish saz, and is fretted long neck flute that is used in the folk music to accompany singing or dancing of various Balkan countries, and it has like this teardrop shaped body that is almost triangular and coming to a rounded peak in the back. Also, from the percussions, I want to mention the tapan or goč, which belongs to percussion instruments. It's a large, wide, ring-shaped snare made of walnut wood, and that is closed with leather that can be from goat or from sheep, and depends which represent the higher or deeper tone, and it's connected with the kind of leather that you use. From those improvised instruments, I want to mention prangija or pucaljka, that is a type of small primitive cannon, and that had different use in this context, but it can be also used as a very interesting instrument, so because it's made from metal, and it can reproduce very interesting sound, and not just prangija, but also I will mention the classic tepsia or dish, casserole dish. Is typically used for baking food, but it also can be used as instrument. that's the side of the story that is connected with instruments. But now I will mention some kind of voices that I mentioned earlier in the first slide. Narikanje, tuženje ili lekanje are very old traditional way of showing sorrow on actual burying ceremonials. It's typically men or women are telling some kind of stories about the decedent in front of the ark, and they're singing some very specific and simple vocal arrangements. The tradition is not very usual in modern times. So in Montenegro, there are just a few people that are still active with this practice. So it's also is, I want to preserve these sounds and to use it and digitalize it, not just digitalize it, but to chromatize it. I will explain what that means in later slides. In Montenegro, there's also individuals that still plays gusla as an instrument. One of them is Miljan Živković. He's a very young man, and here in this YouTube link you can hear this little performance, but we don't have time to listen it now. Balsa, can you just tell me how long? 5 minutes. 5 minutes. Okay, I want to mention some association as performance of Kud Besa that is also very active in Montenegro, and here is also a link where you can see, where you can hear all of those instruments that I mentioned, and also some voices and dance on the scene. Okay, what is the idea, the process and goals? Firstly, sound recording of all these instruments, then digitalization, then chromatization, and procedure is firstly to use sound recorder or and also computer in later phase, in phase of processing, to record the tones, the single tones of those instruments, and then to process them in digital domain. For that purpose, the Neumann TLM 102 is will be used. That is a condenser mic that is ideal for recording acoustic instruments in the highest quality. So we are then dealing with some digital data that will be transferred from the analog to digital domain, and then using some plugins as Melodyne. Maybe you heard already about that plugin. We can put one note, and then we can reproduce all dynamic range or pitches. So we can make some specific bank of sounds. In the purpose of making some contact bank. This is also one of plugins where we can put all those sounds, and then we can play not just tone by tone in all dynamic range. So we can play also chords, melodies, and everything in digital domains, and in the quality of the instruments that we can hear in live space. For that purpose, we use MIDI controllers that can be connected with computers, and they are pulling out that sound and reproduce melodies and also harmonies and everything else. So the idea is to make some fundus of sounds and color for MIDI controllers that can be used, that can be easily downloaded from internet and used for live performance or creating different melodies, simulating the color and phrases of authentic Montenegrin instruments and voices on MIDI controller. Also, it can be used in film, theater, and commercial music industries, and it will improve the cultural milieu in entire territory of Montenegro, and you will influence the creative industry sector. So this is the team. So I want to shorten the presentation, and I will just tell that are more of us in this project. Me, Filip, and Nikola Zekic. He's a master of ethnomusicology, and also the result. Do I have more time, Balsa? Yes. Okay. I want to just read you the results that the most important result of this project are first of all education, then digitalization, chromatization, and promotion of sound of Montenegrin instrument in region, Europe and beyond. In this way, the sound of Montenegrin instruments are not only protected from oblivion through the digitalization process, but also properly promoted as an indispensable part of Montenegro culture and identity, and contribute to the encouragement of regional cooperation and partnership. Okay, so also it will be done some kind of promotion and distribution through the social networks and all kind of medias. And just to conclude, all traditional instruments from the wider and narrower territory of our country are increasingly falling into oblivion and remain alive only in the stories of local residents, less often in museums. The art of playing those instruments is only passed down to a few generations, and that without any guarantee that it could survive in the coming decades, except in memory, pictures, and possibly audio and video recordings. So for end, I will recommend some literature that it is a short history of music folklore in Montenegro that where you can find just more information about those instruments, but not this process that I explained in my presentation. So that's all. Thank you.
All right, Marko, thank you. That was before the time, actually. All right. Now, when the session is over, we can open with some question and answer section. I'll ask Marko. Marko is here with me in the studio. So I'll ask him, do you play these instruments?
Sorry, Balsa.
Are you making any music with these instruments?
I didn't use any of those instruments in my music, but certainly I would if I had this plugin that I intend to make. And because those instruments are not very common and you can't easily find them, so I don't have to go to someone's house to play it and record it. This way, I would have it home as the plugin, so I can use it with MIDI controllers. So certainly, I would use it more if I had this plugin that I intend to make.
Right. Thank you.
I would like to comment.
Natasha, please go ahead.
Thank you so much for this presentation. First of all, I would mention Professors Drobac, Frljuckic, Gosović for amazing projects that you're doing in the field, and all this new and very creative stuff that they are actually leaving some mark, and it's really an honor to have the opportunity to gather you today. But I would go back to my colleague, Professor Jasarovic, that he had a very interesting presentation on the cultural policy implementation, or on the suggestions of the change of the role or the influence of cultural policy in a sense of multiculturalism and softening, in a process of softening the atmosphere to this. Yesterday, we had some interesting conversation when a colleague of mine said that at one point, everybody had to become electronically literate or IT competent. It was something that was completely unknown for many of people 20 years ago, for example. And that we are going towards society where everybody will going to be very soon culturally competent. Do you agree that we are going in that direction, or this is very diverse sector or space in which we cannot talk about it in that sense?
That's for sure the issue in terms of being digital competent. It's a new stage of humanistic studies and humanistic being, in terms that, but I was speaking about intercultural competence, different type of competences that we certainly have to provide. My reflection was on the cultural policy document, the newest one of Montenegro, where there is no mentioning in any case of intercultural dialogue. That's the newest document, and not mentioning, but Montenegro has a higher index now in the intercultural negative or stereotypical discourses over the others. In these days, we have a very strong political debate. We have a very conflict situation about interpretation of post-referendum Montenegro character and so on. And all the competences are very important, especially those which are recognizing the new, which are hybrid in recognizing the new trends. I think that what you ask is also important because there is intercultural intolerance, especially on the digital world, especially on the Facebook and so on. So all the competences, especially media literacy competences, are also important. But I was speaking rather to the structural base, how this government could really support this dialogue, because it's an issue that nobody addressed, and we are going in some way of reconciliation. We are just like speaking about it, but nobody's making official public policy in that particular political matter. And that's the frappant situation in which you cannot expect any kind of the results. You can just expect more tension and more division, because there is no official government. We can say that European Union is far away construction, you know, in our minds, but European Union has the intercultural dialogue. Maybe they are lying each other, but they are lying successfully each other. We are not lying each other. We are just in conflict zones of our misinterpretation of our national identities. And that's the huge problem. How to make this dialogue work.
And do you think that we can make any changes due to the fact that we work with young people and students who are here today listening, you and me and everybody else, and thank you guys for that. So my question is, do you think that we can actually do something in the field regarding that, or we are just depending on a general overview prescribed by the state? I mean, I know that's the main issue. Of course, there's the frame that we are functioning in. But what do you think? Are we responsible anyhow?
We, as a smart people teaching at the universities, we can say some words and say some, we could be advocating some policies to happen. Sometimes it happens. In Montenegro, it happens that we have a policy of creative industries based upon creative economy, based upon my doctoral degrees and so on. But sometimes it happens. Sometimes it happens that somebody in Montenegro government listen Nataša Kraljević and make the change in policy. So we will just have to continue with our pressure from this part of academia workers and people. We are just we will continue to push the system to be more responsive in policy terms, even though we are not politicians. We are just advising them